Like Susie, I'm also interested in questions of social justice, political imagination, and reminds me of these other things that we do that in our sort of first go around that I forgot, is to say that at Lakehead next August we're going to be hosting the biennial conference of the Association for Literature, Environment and Culture in Canada, which is not only literary scholars but also others working in a range of fields sort of across culture, environment and culture, and the theme indeed is culture, justice and environment. So I would welcome many interdisciplinary proposals for that. So that's going to be up in Thunder Bay off the top of Lake Superior next August. So there's sort of two strands of my research that I wanted to mention. So on one hand, my interest in sort of political environmental politics and literary form and modes. So in many ways I'm interested in various kinds of literary modes and how they might relate to particular ways of thinking about and approaching environmental politics. And so eventually this will be a completed book manuscript, but in the meantime it's mostly a series of articles looking at a number of modes as they work in contemporary Canadian literature. So an article on the Gothic and how the use of a sort of Gothic aesthetic is significant for imagining environmental politics in, say, the Rachel Carson, early Atwood period at a certain kind of social political moment, and how the Gothic mode gets reimagined in more contemporary Canadian writing, say the work of Larissa Lai in the 2000s, as the whole question of biopolitics and neoliberalism changes our sense of what is it that environmentalism is about. Okay, I have a recent essay on the Carnivalesque, again, and that's working in feminist domestic writing of Barbara Gowdy. And so again, looking at the particular modes in which people are writing and how that opens up different kinds of ways of thinking about environmental politics. So that's one side of things, but I also actually really wanted to talk about, like Michelle, I have a new Shirk Insight Development Grant that I'm just about to start, so a new project, and I want to mention this because I see that it's one where I'm looking for collaborators, and I think there might be space for some digital tools and so on, and I really have no idea what those might be, and so putting it out there might be helpful. So this is a cultural studies project that is thinking about popular globalisms. And I've been particularly interested in the way in which the way globalism appears in environmentalism shifts in the 1980s to focus on uneven development. And the relationship between forms of popular globalism and the emergence of new kinds of global governance structures and how they become legitimized. And so if we can think about the connections and the tensions, say, within the nation state, right, between sort of popular imaginaries and certain forms of governance, and that they don't fit neatly together, right, and yet sort of one legitimizes the other in certain kinds of ways, we can start to think about globalisms and globalization in a similar kind of way, that there are new modes of global governance that emerge and are legitimized by certain kinds of popular globalism that don't map exactly onto them, and it's worth looking at that tension. And where do these popular globalisms come from, for whom, how do they circulate, and so on. And so this project is looking at the Brundtland Commission. So the World Commission on Environment and Development, which is so significant because it's where sustainable development as a sort of popular policy paradigm comes from. And one of the things that the Brundtland Commission did that they saw as very significant to legitimizing their mandate was to hold public hearings in 13 cities around the world, 3 of which were in Canada, for various reasons. And so part of the whole emergence of the sustainable development paradigm, which is so linked to a lot of new kinds of global governance structures, was particularly about cultivating some sense of global public sphere. And this use of a public hearing format is kind of interesting because we normally think of this as in relationship to acts of citizenship. And yet here they're sort of using this model of the public hearing in this sense of somehow a global public sphere. And so the project, because I'm interested very much in this question of sort of modes and forms, is been looking at, and is going to be looking more at the narrative modes that are at work in the public hearings. And I've done some preliminary work on this, and again, looking at the sort of heterogeneity of the hearings and how they get smoothed over into a particular notion of the global as the future and the future as global in the sort of final report, which uses on almost every other page quotations from these hearings to sort of suggest that the people of the world are in support of this new mandate. So there's a lot of volumes of the material of the hearings. They're incredibly interesting. It's all been digitized quite recently, and so I have the sort of the full set, and it's a lot of material. And so this is where I'm thinking that there might be various kinds of digital tools that would be helpful, even though I mostly am working in a sort of close reading combined with looking at context and sort of circulations part of things. I also would love to have some environmental historians involved, because I think the same material could be of interest in other kinds of ways. So I have a particular interest in this popular globalism. And of course, there's sort of rich sites around the world where these hearings were held, and they did field trips and so on all at the same time. And do I have another minute or no?
Nope.
Okay.
Sorry.